bear with me because it's been a long time since I've done this, like almost a decade. I quit preaching when I went in the Army, so it's been a while, but I have been kind of around the world learning stuff. I've been through Jerusalem and the Vatican and stuff like that to kind of learn more, and this is the first time I come back into it because he's kind of making me. It's his fault. So if this sounds like a cat screeching, blame him. The sermon that I wrote is called "The Farmer and the Flood." It's about prayers and unanswered prayers and the timing of God, not our time. So the verses that we're going to be looking at is it's going to be Isaiah 55. We're going to have Job 36, Romans 8, and James 5. And with that, I'm just going to kind of get into it. I'm not going to go in as depth as I would in a sermon, just because we're trying not to be here for another hour. Because I tend to write a lot. I have a lot going. But the first part of this is called the farmer's plight. Imagine a diligent farmer who has toiled tirelessly to sow his seeds. He now sits eagerly waiting for the rain to nourish his crops, all the while hoping the rain will come. This is a plight every farmer and rancher knows. For we can sow the seeds, but it's God who delivers the rain. Especially because I grew up in the flatlands where the droughts hit pretty bad. So we all know waiting for rain. The farmer prays passionately for rain, but days turn to weeks and the skies remain clear. The farmer grows anxious and begins to question whether God hears his prayers. This is something every Texan knows through time and time again with the droughts. A prayer we have all sent out asking God, why is the rain not coming in? I need it. My family's going to starve. We're going to lose our house. You know, we've all been in those situations where we need this now. We don't understand why it's not here. So here's more of where we go into understanding God's timing. And we look into Isaiah 55. It's going to be verse 8 through 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, my thoughts higher than your thoughts. God, in his infinite wisdom, sees a broader picture. You can't see a forest while you're staring at a tree. That's something that a lot of us have an issue with. We're looking at a singular problem. We don't see all the other problems surrounding it, but we want this problem fixed. When you study the ecosystem and science behind the earth, we look at rain cycles, dirt absorption, and the earth's overall ability to process water, soil fermentation, nitrates, all that kind of stuff. We look at plants and their ability to stand the heat. All these little tiny factors that go into the science behind how the earth and how we can process crops. Too much water here or there can create a river which floods and erodes the soil. Too little water can dry out the earth and it can create sand or infertile dirt. So both are equally as unfruitful. For my 100-acre plot to have rain, the surrounding 10 miles of land has to be able to soak up the same amount of water. So why do we just go into talk about ecosystems? This is a religious sermon. It's kind of weird, right? Well, this kind of science helps us to understand the deeper understanding of the forest, because we're looking at a tree. We have to understand God's forest. All the factors that God has to see when he's answering prayers. We have to understand that the rain were to fall too soon in too great a quantity, the ground would not be ready to absorb it, causing a flood. Best case scenario, it washes the seeds we so tirelessly planted. Worst case scenario, the floods continue to accumulate downhill and devastate villages or other people's crops downstream. So that's one thing that we really look into. Like, we see a lot of floods and we see a lot of issues and all this kind of stuff whenever the ecosystem comes out of balance. You know what I mean? One person's prayer for water here can devastate so much prayer who said, please God, make it stop raining. You know, there's a balance between the two, and there's a balance between everybody's prayers that we don't get to see. We don't get to see that part because we can't hear everybody's prayers. So our next verse we're going to look at is it's in Job 36. It's going to be verses 26 through 33. How great is our God, beyond our understanding. The number of his years is past finding out. He draws upon the drops of water which distill as rain to the streams. The clouds pour down their moisture and abundant showers fall on mankind. Who can understand how he spreads out the clouds, how he thunders from his pavilion? See how he scatters his lightning about him, bathing the depths of the sea. This is the way he governs the nations and provides food in abundance. He fills his hands with lightning and commands it to strike its mark. His thunder announces the coming storm. Even the cattle make known his approach. This passage in Job, it talks more about relentless suffering of Job himself. And it's at that point where he breaks down and he's just angry. I mean, his skin is turned to boils. His family's been killed. His crops are devastated. All his cattle have died. And he's at a point in his life where he just is angry with God. He's not blaspheming against God, but he's angry. He's angry that his prayers haven't been answered. He doesn't understand what's going on. And this is the first time we see him turn and look at God and say, hey, what are you doing? What's going on? And God responds. He responds with, you can't see the forest while you're looking at a tree. You don't see all these things that are being commanded. You don't see the turning of the earth, the winds, the rain, the moisture, all of this stuff. You don't see that. And that's one of God's ways to show him that there are more things going on than what he can see. So it's kind of hard for him to understand that plight as it goes on. So that's more the part there of Job, and then we move on to the greater good. While the farmer's suffering is immediate, God delays in sending the rain is a measure to protect the villages from greater suffering. It's just one of those more factors of how we understand how this plays into that. The illustration of a profound lesson that our prayers may not always be answered in the way or time we desire, but God's plan is always for the greater good. We look again into Romans, which is going to be Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who loved him, who have been called according to his purpose. It's just one of those reassurances that God he answers us in his time. And we have another verse. It's James 5:7-8. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crops, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. The farmer's patience, though tested, is ultimately rewarded when the rains arrive in perfect timing, ensuring a bountiful harvest, causing no harm to the village. We all know this situation, and we look at a lot of metaphors. And the Bible is just full of metaphors. Jesus talks about a lot, explaining one thing to explain another thing. One of the greatest metaphors that I love out of the Bible is whenever God is talking about the people who toil his field, he'll pay them one coin, one penance. The people that came in the morning and the people that came in the evening, he paid them all one. People got mad at that because they're like, well, I worked all day. It's like, well, I told you were going to get one, and I told him he was going to get one. You knew what you were going to get. You know, it's one of those metaphors, and Christ used it a lot. And this is where the farmer, not all of us are farmers. Not all of us are ranchers. Not all of us have toiled the field or turned up the dirt. But we've all made prayers. And we've all had those times where we don't understand why our prayers aren't being answered. We don't understand why my kid needs a kidney. Why is God not answering this? Well, we don't understand that for my kid to get a kidney, 3 other people don't get a kidney. You know, there's all these situations that we don't understand because we can't see the bigger picture. And it makes it kind of difficult. But when you start to understand that God will give you what you need, not what you want. And it's in his timing and not ours. So our conclusion is going to read, as we reflect on the story of Job and then comes to the story of the farm and the flood, let us have faith and remember that God's timing is impeccable. Our unanswered prayers are not a sign of neglect, but a testament to his greater wisdom and love for us. We must trust in his plan, remain patient, and have faith that he is working all things for our good. Let us continue to pray, knowing that God hears us and will answer in his perfect timing. All have patience that what is to come is greater than what is now. Remember, God has 3 answers to every prayer, and this one comes from my dad. He said the 3 answers is yes, not yet, and not in the way that you think, not in the way that you want, but in the way that you need. And those are some of the hardest things for us to think about, that sometimes we don't get what we pray for because we don't need that. That's not what we need. We need something else. And God gives us what we need. And a lot of time we think that he's not listening because he's not giving us what we want. Yet when we pray for rain, we must carry our umbrella with us. Have faith that God will answer your prayer in his time, but always be prepared to receive the blessing you pray for. If you pray for rain, carry your umbrella, even when there are no clouds in the sky. Trust in the Lord in all things that give into his timeline, not our timeline, because he knows more than we do. And that's one of the things that we have to be able to understand and go more into, is the depth of what God knows and the lacking of what we know. When we pray and when we ask him for things and when we talk to him, sometimes you just talk because you want to talk, but expect that he's going to give you what you need, not what you want. But he will always answer you. He always has an answered prayer. Whether it is unanswered, it is answered, because he knows and he has a greater plan. We just can't see it all.
Thank you, sir.